Alright, so in this video I'm going to cover some issues I've been having with the transmission and transfer case in my 98 Dodge 2500. It's got the NV4500 transmission and the NP241 transfer case. I'm going to cover the transmission first and then I'll work back to the transfer case. But the issue I was having with my transmission was it was popping out of fifth gear even though it is a rebuilt transmission and has the fifth gear nut fix. It also has some upgraded synchros in there and it had a dual stage flywheel that I wanted to eliminate because with the upgraded synchros it made shifting this thing a pain, especially when towing in the hills. So I've got the single stage clutch in there now. It shifts a lot better. And then for the fifth gear fix, the company I had purchased it from thought it was the upper with the linkage, the shift forks. So they sent me a new upper, and then I was also doing some more research, and another guy had said he had an irregular worn fork in this section of the transmission that goes out to the fifth gear back here. Yes, I replaced that as well. That was just a $12 part. And then I brought it to a transmission shop for them to take a look at the fifth gear itself and the hub assembly. They said that the teeth on there were worn kind of funky and the hub assembly was kind of worn. It was probably, they said it wasn't very much and they probably wouldn't have caught it if I didn't tell them what symptoms I had. So they're thinking the company had just reused some parts that they shouldn't have reused when they rebuilt this thing. Or it could have very well have just been the upper that they sent me a brand new one on. But I just decided to replace all of it while I was in there. I didn't want to pull this thing back out. But now 2 weeks later, I am seeing fluid leaking from my transmission. I thought it was a seal, but I was looking up here. What looked like a scratch in the paint was actually a crack. And I was doing some research. It turns out this is an aluminum housing that attaches to the transmission mount, and that is known for cracking. So I did find a cast iron version of that a company makes brand new to replace these. It was $100 shipped to me, so can't beat that price. And it'll match the rest of the transmission, which is all cast iron, and for some reason they just made this section aluminum. So that is prone to cracking, so if you got a leak somewhere back here and you don't think it's a seal, it could be cracked right around where this mount comes in and connects to the back of the transmission. Yeah, that ended up being my fifth gear fix, and then that cast iron plate will be the fix for this leaking portion of the housing that I didn't catch before. Yeah, and then the single stage clutch makes it a lot nicer to shift, and I know towing's going to be a lot nicer, especially with the big gap between third and fourth gear on these things. So that was it with the transmission. Going back to the transfer case, this thing was leaking like crazy. I thought it was just the 20-year-old seals, but upon disassembly, I started tapping this guy with a rubber mallet, and it ended up shattering up here on top. So it must have been cracked up here, and I didn't notice until I started smacking that guy with a hammer. And that was my main leak back here. This guy ended up costing about $200 to replace, but came with a brand new bearing. And then I should have replaced this tail shaft as well. It had a little dent in it, and I was hoping just replacing the seal would keep it from leaking again, but it is leaking, so I am going to replace that tail shaft housing, and that should take care of that leak here. But yeah, I think I ended up cracking this, and this is called the output shaft bearing housing. That cracks pretty commonly on these, and it's usually, most guys say it's because they bent their rear drive shaft, and it being way off balance ends up cracking that. I think what happened in my case is a neighbor had gotten a tractor stuck in some mud, and I was trying to tug it out, and just yanking on it, I think ended up cracking that housing. I don't have an anti-wrap, so I'm guessing my axle was probably wrapping quite a bit and sending the drive shaft into a funky angle. So I think an anti-wrap bar would be the fix for that, to keep that from breaking again. Yeah, just a heads up, if you got a transfer case leak and you've been recently tugging on some stuff. I know my coworker, he said his dad cracked his transfer case, or maybe it was his transmission like mine is as well, tugging some logs on some property he was clearing out. So yeah, if you're using it as a work truck but you're tugging and not being real gentle towing, yeah, that could be possible that you break these things. But yeah, just heads up, let you guys know what I've encountered. Hopefully it'll help somebody else out and fix your fifth gear problem if you've already got the fifth gear nut fix. Oh, and also I found it's easier to pull these things out if you take the 4 bolts out of the bell housing, pull the transmission out by itself with the bell housing still attached, and then you can remove that later if you need to get in there. But yeah, it takes off probably about 20 pounds, and with how heavy these things are, it's a pretty good idea to try to get as much weight off these things as possible before you start pulling them out of here. But yeah, just heads up, and hope this helps you guys out. Thanks.